Talk with Rohan Chakravarthi. Today, we've got a very special guest, the one and only Scary Alvarez. Hashtag Barry is the Don on Twitter. Scary, how you doing, my man?
Doing good, and you must be super excited. Probably one of the most exciting moments of your life, having the Dawn jump on your show. So this
Oh,
is awesome.
absolutely. The honor is mine, and I am glad that you could join me here today.
And we had a little talk backstage, and I mercifully Cindy was here to help me with some technical glitches that I had. She's always there. She's always my plus one. So it's good to know to have someone in my corner like that.
That's funny. The tech is always, something that evades us all, But
Yeah, I'm
with the
76 and I'm approaching middle age here pretty soon, so I don't have all the bells and whistles of you crazy kids nowadays. So I sometimes have to have a little help with that, but it's going great.
one rings, so that's all that matters.
Yep.
You're that guy. But we'll start off here with the Badgers because there's a lot to unpack. Really, when you talk about the entirety of this offseason, the way that it goes, it's like a story within a story within a story. There are so many different stages that go along with the way that this Wisconsin Badgers offseason has gone. And when you talk about the coaching changes, the transfer portal, and then even just the spring and fall camp kind of portions of it. So there's a lot that goes on with it. But glad to break it all down to you. Let's start off with, go way back to last November 28th. Luke Fickle was hired. Explain to me, your level of shock, your level of just the reaction that goes along with it. And then obviously with the following weeks that ensued with this Badgers coaching staff and transfer portal kind of getting alongside and getting underway.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you know that I'm in the know on many things, but I will say, like I would say probably 99.9% of Wisconsin fans that morning when Pete Thamel noted that Luke Fickle was going to be the next football coach at Wisconsin, there was a moment where everyone's, I would say, heart stopped, but it was a very shocking, surprising moment, and underscored just how stealthily McIntosh was working behind the scenes to do all these things. Um, my first thought, which is, I'm not sure if a lot of fans felt this way, or ex coaches felt this way, but was to think of Jim Leonard. So I think that most of the Wisconsin fan base, even after the Minnesota loss the day before, had presumed that Jim was going to take over uh, permanently as head coach, and then built his staff from there. And I've been a long time huge fan of Jim Leonard, Jim Leonard the coach, Jim Leonard the person. He's a genuine article. And so my first thought went to him after that initial excitement kind of wore off was, oh my God, this means Jim Leonard's not going to be the head coach of the Badgers. And then, that dream process, can he still be the DC and all that stuff? So it was mixed emotions, but I don't want to be disingenuous and say that there wasn't a large part of me that was incredibly excited, knowing that Luke Fickle, with his brand of football success, personality, and culture, coming to the Badgers wasn't tantalizing, because it absolutely was. And I believe that the honeymoon period with Coach Fick, which is still going on for another 2 more days here, he's knocked it out of the park. Sorry, I'm using a surprising, probably I'm using a baseball analogy, given state of Wisconsin baseball. I get blamed for that sometimes, Ron, and that's not fair. But the way he has brought the staff in, the way he has recruited, the way he has not detonated the previous culture, but has layered on his unique additional aspects of his culture onto what was already there. And what I mean by that is, it's still a hard hitting, flexing, weightlifting oriented, tough guy in the trenches kind of mentality. But he sprinkled in some stuff with the way the offensive system is going to be there, a lot more social media interaction, very kind of modernized things. Things that got a little bit stagnant, frankly, with some of that stuff. And the way he's recruited as well has been very positive. So I tell you, I mean, you got to get and do it between the hashes. But the offseason Luke Fickle, from the higher on forward, has been an A+ in my estimation.
I mean, I think when you break it down like that, yeah. First of all, when you go back, then you do feel for Jim Leonard, because it's true. The entire locker room was behind Jim Leonard. I mean, captain and senior safety John Torchio went along to say who, if you're an idiot if you don't hire Jim Leonard, as your head coach. Now, especially when it comes to college football, unfortunately, as much as it sounds, as much as it sounds unfortunate, you don't, in the business portion, you don't factor in your players. You don't, because it's just a cycle of players in and out. It's not like you're building a franchise around a specific player like you do in the professional leagues. It's that players are here for 4 years at the max, and then, or depending on redshirts and things, and then they leave. And so I think that if you were to move off a guy like Jim Leonard, if you were to move off, a heralded head coach in Paul Chryst, you had to make sure you went in and went with a home run hire. You couldn't do it with somebody with minimal experience. You couldn't do it with somebody, who you didn't have full confidence that could really reshape a program as esteemed as the Wisconsin Badgers. And that's where, McIntosh did well. I think he did make a solid selection, at least in the early returns that we're seeing in Luke Fickle. And there's a lot that goes into it. You pointed out the stealth, obviously, in the way that they went about it. It was known a little bit behind closed doors that he had a meeting with Luke Fickle, but the conversations, the ongoing conversations that were happening, of course, over through the end of the year and into when Luke Fickle was hired, those were all completely quiet. You didn't even hear a report about any of that stuff. And then obviously the news breaks. But going on to what Fickle has done so far, modernizing this team was necessary, because the Badgers already, unfortunately, given their location, are at a disadvantage when it comes to recruiting. They need every single kind of grasp that helps them on that recruiting front, and social media, the way that you put that program out there to belong with the blue bloods and things like that. That's the way. And I mean, it's not like Wisconsin isn't, but you've got to make sure that you're using everything in your power to kind of go along and help you on that recruiting front and really help your brand overall. Fickle has done that, but he's also shown results on the recruiting front in landing some key guys, right? It's like the Badgers are already at a top 25 class. We'll see if that stands, but they've had a strong class in Fickle's first true class in 24, and then hopefully that carries over to 25. But there's a lot of buzz around this, around this team, and that's where I kind of want to ask you: is the hype justified?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's absolutely justified. But the caveat is this, and I mentioned this in the intro. Until you step on that field, you just don't know. You can have a very strong suspicion that it's going to be highly successful, and I am in that camp. I think Fickle is going to do a great job here. He has surrounded himself with incredible staff. He's built the culture. He has a track record. Yeah, he's getting the recruits. The buy-in is there from the players. All those things that you want to see on the Thursday before the first game, I think those are all 5 out of 5s. He's done it. Got to do it in between the hash marks. So, getting back to the initial thought about how the season's going to go, I'm optimistic. I think this is going to be a good Badger team. I think he's put a lot of talent on the field. I think he's addressed some of the areas that had backslid a little bit last year. But this is a little bit like you put stuff in a box, you shake it up, and you pour it out, and you don't know exactly how it's gonna look initially. And I think there may be here and there a couple of growing pains with this team, with the new offense, completely new roles for offensive linemen and things like that. But ultimately, I do think it's going to work. And at the end of the day, if anyone thinks this is going to be a 5 wideout, throw the ball 45 times a game team, they are in for an incredibly rude awakening, because this team, Phil Longo, as the offensive coordinator, is going to take what the defense gives him. And if that means rushing for 250 yards in the game when it's cold in November, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to be – I think there will be games when Tanner Mordecai has 350 yards passing. That is going to happen. I believe that. But it is good. The air raid at Wisconsin is going to be more – let's create some additional running lanes now that the back of the boxes aren't stacked, that sort of thing, and just kind of see how the game flows and what the defense gives us. Look, you're going to be playing games like, for example, at Minnesota in the cold of November. It's probably going to be cold in the 30s. That's not going to be a throw it 40 times game. I don't care what. Right. I don't care if Minnesota is playing a 3-man box. That's not going to be a 40. So I think that this team is going to rise or fall with how successfully they take what the defense gives them in their games. And I'm confident that this team is going to move the ball offensively. Some games will be better than others, but I'll tell you this: in 2024, 2025, 2026, once this system has had the ability to take root and get all the guys that he wants and all the positions he wants, and this is not a knock on Tanner Mordecai. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. But once the system, the guys we developed in the system, emerge into those positions, I think it's going to be an even more dangerous team. I think this might be, in some ways, the worst Wisconsin team of the next 3 or 4 years. And I don't mean that as a cut at all. It's going to be a great team. So, certainly better than last year by a wide margin. But I do think it's going to be better. Now, Rohan, you peeked ahead the schedules that I've peeked ahead at. 2024 Wisconsin schedule. 25. It is an absolute bloodbath compared to the 2023 schedule. There are plenty of trap games this year. You got Ohio State at home too, and on the road at Purdue in a night game. Washington State's going to be tricky at night up there in the Big Ten Hate Fest game. But Alabama, Penn State, Michigan, at Iowa. The 2024 schedule might be the hardest Wisconsin schedule that I can remember. So Fickle, Longo, et al., and Tressel are going to have to elevate what they're going to need this year to do well in order to do well in 24 and beyond. It's going to be fun to watch, but I think it's going to be the talent and otherwise on this team is only going to grow.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, you point out the air raid system. I think there are a lot of misconceptions with what the air raid system is and what Phil Longo's air raid system is. The air raid system obviously comes from Mike Leach, and Mike Leach is a drop back 65 times, fully buying into that throwing a lot, right? That's what Mike Leach did. But Phil Longo's offense is a lot different. It's not a lot different. It's got some similar principles, but it mixes in that RPO work, similar to how Ryan Day over at Ohio State mixes in a lot of RPO principles into his offense, mixes in a lot of RPO work, getting the ball out quick while also incorporating the run game. A friend of mine, he told me an intriguing stat about Phil Longo. He's had, I think, 9 1,000-yard rushers in his last 11 seasons as a coordinator. And it's not like the second rusher on the team has been far off. There have been years where Phil Longo has really, really gone heavy on the ground. I mean, you look back at 2020, I believe, they had a two-headed horse at UNC with Michael Carter and Javonte Williams splitting carries equally around 157 each. I think it was 156 to 157. And I think especially with the Badgers now having a two-headed horse at running back, similar to those days where Longo had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, you're going to see an even split, in my opinion, at the running back position, but also a heavy workload. And I think that, it'll be at least, somewhere in the mix of at least 10 to 15 carries a game, with some having the propensity for more. I do think there'll be more running, though, than there has been in the past in these Longo offenses. But it's well noted that it's not just a completely, it's not just a throw every down downfield kind of offense. Instead, it mixes in a lot more of these RPO principles as well. And that's where you hear this word called tempo. Fickle has preached tempo, because this offense isn't trying to hit you downfield shots every single time. No, it's trying to get the ball out quick and then move forward and play fast. That's the way that it is. And it requires things like timing. A lot of it will be timing, given these short routes and given the need to go from read 1 to read 2 and a half field read in that RPO system. And so it's there's a lot of these sprinkles in there that make it different from your regular air raid system.
Yeah, you raised some good points there, and one of them, and I guess we're talking to the fan base right now. By the way, I just noticed I'm on the 49ers field right here. Yikes. Okay, that's fine. We can Photoshop that out and put it in Lambeau or something. But or Camp Randall actually works better. But you're a Niners guy. I knew that. I still came on. That shows what a loving God I am. It's no, come on, man. Okay, it's fine. It's I'm over the.
You're on enemy territory today, so we're keeping it on.
I'm over the initial shock. And you're sticking with me here a lot longer than the Niners stick with their draft pick quarterback. But too soon? The Cowboys are like, okay, sure, sounds good. We can get into that later. Yeah. You look like you want to say something, but anyway, getting back to the initial point is, yeah, I think that the offense will, again, as I said, it'll take what the defense gives them. But yeah, anyone who thinks this is going to be a Mike Leach, rest in peace, style air raid offense, I know it's Big Ten fan bases are like, it's such a sexy topic, right? So writers who don't know the inside of the locker room here are like, Wisconsin's going to be throwing the ball over the place. How could that work? It's not going to be like that. It's going to be just, I think, probably a much more modern offense with a fairly even run pass split is what I'm expecting, and then one could be higher than the other one based on game plan, trajectory, things like that. But give it some time. If you think that Wisconsin is going to come in and put up 83 points on Buffalo, it's not going to be like that. It just isn't. I mean, it's going to take a little time for it to click. I think we'll have some success. I expect a comfortable win, but that's a bold caliber MAC team, and I think it's going to be a nice little bit of a challenge. But what I don't expect is, like we had so many times in the last couple of years, a 6-3, 7-3, 10-7 halftime score. Kind of, it's not going to be like that either. So I'll say, 38-13, 38-17 kind of win week one. And then we'll talk about Washington State, which I think is a bit of a daunting task, which we will get through a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, that week 2 matchup, that's maybe, where you start to sprinkle, a little bit of that difficulty in. But if we're looking specifically at week 1 for the moment, you talk about Buffalo, right? And, well, first of all, I want to say 27.5 points is quite a lot. It's quite a lot for that spread at the moment. But the Wisconsin Badgers, that offense, I think that the first 3 games, really, these non-conference games, specifically games 1 and 3, I'm looking to see a little more, not only from the starters, but some of those guys that won't necessarily get as much playing time down the line. I'm talking about the Jonas DeClonas, who's in the 2 deep, a true freshman. Want to see how he holds up against competition, against collegiate competition, given his size at 5'10", 190 pounds. You want to see how that holds up if you play him on the outside as that off man guy, or if you play him in the nickel. And, there's some other guys, like some of the wide receivers near the middle of the depth chart, that kind of thing. But more importantly, you do want to see, how are these guys gelling, right? Because, like I said, this is a timing. If you're talking offense, this is a timing offense. How well connected is Mordecai with his new targets? Because it's not only like Mordecai's new, Will Pauling is new, CJ Williams is new, Bryson Green is new, and those are 3 of your top 4 receivers this year. I anticipate Pauling is going to be your leading receiver in terms of yards, catches, and whatnot. But you've got 4 really options that are going to be featured heavily in this rotation. Chimere Dike obviously being the other one. How well is Mordecai connected in terms of timing with some of these plays, and how well, how is that connection brewed so far compared to in the spring, when we saw Mordecai last, at least when the public saw Mordecai last?
Yeah. You're talking about the elephant in the room, which is the spring game. And I think it's fair to say that offensively that was a little bit suboptimal, but I do think that was a one-off, kind of a weird, hot, windy day when it was, I would say early in camp. It was late in camp, but I don't think that's from what I understood from the other practices, that was by a wide margin the worst practice session Wisconsin had the entire spring, including the first.
Easily.
So and that was an outlier. But
yeah,
I think how Mordecai connects with his receivers, it's kind of 2 sides to it. One, having the unique option of having so many good players in that room is such a huge advantage that past quarterbacks, Mertz never had that advantage. He had some good receivers, but he never had a room that looked like this. In fact, I'm trying to think of Wisconsin, a deeper, more talented in total Wisconsin receiver room than this one, going all the way back through when I was coaching, and I cannot think of one. I'm not saying there weren't standouts that are better than some of the guys here. I'm talking about the overall room. But your point to sometimes, too many toys in the chest, I don't know, maybe that has meant that there hasn't been as much timing. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But frankly, of the 2, I'll take having the talent in that room and just kind of see where it goes. But I think Mordecai is going to have, and you already said that you think it's going to be Paulding. I think Paulding is a great talent and is going to be a great slot guy. But I think there are 5 or 6 guys on any given day that could lead Wisconsin in yards and receptions.
That's fair.
Any given day. Lewis hasn't been a high volume guy, but that's the kind of guy that you might get a 70-yard touchdown from and not think twice about it. He's that kind of guy. CJ Williams, the upside, the pedigree, he's there. There's a reason he's the number 2 receiver. It's not just because he transferred. He has showed out. Skylar Bell, we all know what he can do. Will Paulding, Bryson Green, Chimere Dike. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches. It really, truly is. And then you're not even talking about Braylon Allen, as the potential All Big Ten tailback of the year, and Malusi as well. So if this offense can stay healthy, get some decent play out of guys like Hayden Rucci, my Wisconsin Badger grandson. Long story. Jake left. Hayden's a great guy, but you have a lot of talent in that room, and then let's see if the line gels. That's a big. I talked about that earlier. If the line gels, missing its starting center, it's going to be really interesting. But Bortolini is going to be fine. He has a lot of experience. He's late in camp. He was doing just fine. There was some issues early in camp with getting the snaps and stuff, but I think it's going to be all right. But very excited, Rohan. Very excited.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about the offense, you talk about that offensive line gelling. That was an issue last year. There was too much rotation. And frankly, I think they didn't have a great plan going into it. Every single week we talked with Bobby Engram on Tuesday, and I'd ask him, what is your plan with the offensive line? And, is there going to be rotation? Things like that. It's like they were a little uncertain at the beginning of the week. You come to Saturday, you see a new front out there. And people don't understand the continuity, especially at this level where you don't necessarily have as much experience as you do when you go to the NFL. It's important to be alongside the same guys every single week. It's not only about just who your one-on-one assignment is in pass blocking. It's how do you pick up stunts, because a lot of defensive coordinators like to throw that there. How do you pick up blitzes? How can you trust that you can pass off one of your defenders to the guy on your left or the guy on your right so that you can go ahead and pick up a rushing defender? It's different nuances that you talk about the offensive line. And I think that it's important to have continuity. And that's why one of the bigger questions for me is Jake Renfro. It seems like he's going to be out about 4 to 6 weeks. Where does his role kind of come in after that? Luke Fickle hinted at it a couple of weeks ago, saying how it might be in Renfro's best interest to sit out the year, just get fully healthy, and then kick it back in 2024. But he is your best center. I think that he personally is, just because he's got the snapping down. And it also allows Tanner Bortolini to go to his most comfortable position of guard. And so you do have different questions there, but I'm more confident for sure in this offensive line than I was last year, because I think Joe Huber's a solid player. He played at tackle. He's going to start at left guard. You also have Bortolini, who arguably is your best offensive lineman there at center. Jack Nelson's another guy who returns. Furtney, he's solid. And then Riley Mahlman comes back after the injury last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 things we're talking about here. One is how it will gel with the new system, and that's a legitimate concern, certainly with Renfro's injury. And by the way, I don't want to handicap injuries. That's a little bit ghoulish. But if it ultimately comes down to him taking a medical red shirt, that might end up making the most sense. I'm not so much worried about that from a continuity standpoint, but just for whatever's best for the kid. I'm certain that's what Fick will do. But you look up and you see Jack Nelson and Raleigh Mahlman, just a couple of maulers out there at tackle, and it's very enticing. The talent level on this offensive line, the pedigree, is very, very, very high. These are a lot of big-time recruits here, some good athletes, some absolute maulers. And you look at the 2 deep, and you see guys like Nolan Rucci, 5-star, and just another great kid who's really just biding his time right now before he starts, and Bruner, Benchwall, Wettig. I mean, these are guys who would be starting at other schools, including Big Ten schools, and they're sitting behind guys. So I don't want to bellyache about the offensive line. Again, I think it may still be a work in progress as far as the chemistry. and all that. But I do think this line has potential to be certainly the best line since 2019.
No, I think so too. I think this has got some solid potential. And again, it's up to injury, right? Injury is the one thing you can't account for, and that's the true thing that derailed last year's offensive unit. But you've got good depth, you've got good starters, and it seems like they're confident. Not long ago, but Jack McNeil wanted to roll with about 8 guys, in his offensive line rotation. You've already got 5. If Renfro comes back, that's 6. And then you've got some solid depth there to where you could pick and choose on who you really want out there. Let's move though to a position where there isn't as much depth, but there is a little intrigue with a certain player. That's tight end, right? You Clay Cundiff, Jack Eschenbach, they're off the roster due to their own personal reasons. You also have some injuries in the group. That leads Hayden Rucci to be your starting tight end, and that leaves Tucker Ashcraft, a freshman, to be your number 2 tight end. What do you think about the tight end room this year?
I think it's in good hands. I mean, look, if you're looking for 5-star NFL caliber receiving first round draft pick tight ends, that's not what we're going to find here. But I think it's a nice compliment. Obviously, the injuries and the attrition, and by the way, some great kids leaving the program. Very sad to see that, but I wish those guys all the best, obviously. But Rucci is a smart, heady, physical player with actually better receiving skills than people think he has. I don't know if you remember the bowl game. That was not a fluke. That's what he can give you. So he'll be fine, even in the context of not running it 40 times a game. He's going to fit in that offense. Ashcraft, if you just talk about what the coaches have thought about him in camp, there's a lot to like there. And so we'll see how that goes. And then, there's some other guys down the line. So yeah, the depth is the only thing that concerns me. If those kids stay healthy, like we hope they will, the tight end room is going to be absolutely fine going forward.
When you talk about the tight ends, Phil Longo's offense hasn't always featured tight ends, but that's because they weren't necessarily there in great capacity at UNC. You had a couple more blocking guys. Garrett Walston was there, players like that. But last year, when you look at the UNC offense, they had a lot of rotation there in that kind of room at their receiving options, and they had 3 tight ends who got at least 15 catches. Bryson Nesbitt, I think, had 35. Kamari Morales had 29, and then their third guy, I think it was John Copenhaver, had 15. You have some rotation there, and I think this year at tight end, the opportunity is open. I like what I've seen, or I like what I've heard from about Tucker Ashcraft so far. I'm going to wait for my own reservations. I haven't watched fall camps personally, so I can't necessarily say exactly what I've seen, but I've heard coaches, they like him. He's going to play a lot this year. He is probably the one true freshman that's got a clear role into playing a good amount in 2023. But Rucci, like you said, don't sleep on his receiving ability. He's known as a blocker. He's faced his injury issues. He's known, he's a strong mauler pretty much as a blocker, but he's involved. He's evolved a little bit as a receiver. Nothing necessarily amazingly special, but he's evolved to where he can be a capable guy as a receiver and as a route runner. You might see him in that intermediate kind of portion, but also tight ends in this offense and a quick hitter offense might just be checkdowns and things like that. So all you want is capable hands that can, turn up field and get a few yards. That's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, Rucci will be fine, and he's got it between the ears too. He's a smart kid. He's going to know the playbook. He's going to know the right thing to do in a given situation. So I'm, despite my own personal affinity for the lad, I just feel like in the offenses that he has been in so far, and having to switch the systems, although it's the same system basically, he wasn't featured the way I think he could have been in an offense that could have really featured a tight end. And I always thought that was kind of a missed opportunity, but he'll get his, and he'll be responsible for a lot of big plays, whether the ball's in his hands or not.
Right.
But I know it's going to be refreshing for him not to have to maul block every single snap 35 or 40 times a game. I'm sure he can lay the hurt down when he needs to, but he'll be fine. And I think he's going to surprise some people this year.
And if you have more of a dual threat role rather than a pure blocking role, that also decreases the the opportunity for injury. I mean, obviously you can get injured in any capacity in this game, but having to go out there, hit somebody 35, 40 times a game, like you said, that takes a toll on a body. And so that could be an opportunity for Rucci. But let's move over to the defense, the other portion of the other portion of the field, the one that hasn't necessarily seen as much hype, but I think that there is still a good amount to talk about. Let's start though with the guys up front. Defensive line, what are you thinking about that unit heading into 2023?
Yeah, I think the D line more so than the offensive line has a little bit of mystery about it, and some of it is health related. It looks like Varner is going to be coming back, but you'll lose an NFL guy who's going to get meaningful playing time for the Steelers. Uh, that's a big role to fill on Keanu Benton. I mean, that's a big role to fill. So you've heard all about they're going to do it by committee and they're going to rotate a bunch of guys in there. I don't think that's coach speak. I think that's legitimately what is going to happen. But what that doesn't mean is that a player can't step up and take that big jump. That could always happen. So you could have a guy like James Thompson Jr. take that leap. Varner might be a 10, 12 sack guy once things get going. You just don't know. So I'm, again, if they can stay healthy and all that basic stuff, I think this defensive line has the potential to be better than people think it's going to be. And maybe if things fall right, could be a real strength of the team, which I think no one thinks right now because you don't have a bunch of NFL caliber guys on it. But I'm very pleased with the depth, and I think these guys will do fine.
When you talk about the defensive line this year, I mean, there are a lot of shiny kind of positions. Defensive line isn't necessarily always one of them for the Wisconsin Badgers. Keanu Benton obviously has kind of helped accelerate that by being a second round pick and being the talent that he was. Had him as a top 32 player in this past class when doing my draft evaluations. Good player, but overall, this defensive line, it's a room where you do truly have to wait and see because you've got returners, Rodas Johnson, James Thompson's in there, Isaiah Mullins, although he's injured right now. You've got returners in the room. However, you don't have necessarily that one star. That's kind of the group, the guy that's missing. And this is a position the Badgers also haven't recruited that well. At least in the last, that's something that they're still looking for in the 2024 class, some more recruitment there. And then obviously hoping to figure that out in the 2025 class. But I think the true X factor in this group is Darian Varner, because when you talk about a guy who has seen 7.5 sacks over there at Temple, 12.5 tackles for loss in that season, and was a first team All AAC guy coming back from injury, you might ease him in early on. And he might also only just be a pass rushing specialist and allow some of these other guys, to take over in the early downs. But you need somebody to kind of fill the void of that pass rusher. Don't know who exactly is going to fill that void, but the best guess for me is Darian Varner. And so if he can return to his old form post-injury, that's a good sign for the Badgers and a great transfer, an underrated guy, because that's a guy who he's got some moves and he's able to work it. And it's not even as an outside linebacker. This is as a pure defensive end. Yep. So yeah, I mean, that's the guy who I think is the X factor in this room.
I think that's a good one. And again, his health is going to be a factor, but I look at the depth chart. There are a lot of dudes who can get to the quarterback. I mean, even like Piakowski or Gatz. I mean, these are guys who have the ability, have shown in the past that they can sack the quarterback. So I don't look at this and say, and I understand we're talking about outside linebackers now, but yes, there's no JJ Watt on this defensive line. We understand that, and I think you raise a point that Fickle, one of the huge priorities, not only now but in the future, to get into that same class as Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, as far as some of the recruiting and on the field, is going to be getting those stud defensive linemen recruits. It's a thing. I know we were in the mix for a couple of them, but I know that's going to be a huge priority going forward. But the hand we're dealt this year is we don't have those kind of guys. We don't have the blue chip dudes, but we have dudes who could play like blue chip dudes do later on. So I mean, let's just see what happens. I think we'll get to the quarterback, and losing Herbig. I mean, that is, you can't. And obviously, that's another one that no one is shocked who was a Wisconsin Badger fan that he is going to be a very good player for the Steelers. But losing Herbig means they have to just recreate that production from other places, as I said. So, Turner, Gatz, Piakowski, we're going to find a way to do it, but it's not going to be the classic thing where we have an all-league sack guy. It's just not going to happen this year. But we do have a bunch of dudes who can do it. So yeah, let's wait and see. I think this defense is gonna surprise people. I think they're going to be on the field, maybe a little bit more and earlier in between drives than in past years. So we'll see how that goes. And they're probably going to get more points than in past years. But I do think they're going to be playmakers. We're going to find at the end, when you do a retrospective on the 2023 season, they're going to be guys who are going, how did we not know that guy was going to come in and be a stud? There's going to be a couple of guys like that on this defense. I bank it.
No, and I mean that's when you talk about a defense like this where some guys have now gone, you've got an exodus of new players and some guys who could rise. That's very true. You look across the board, defensive line. I mean, with Benson gone and Herbig gone, there's an opportunity to be had there. And I think really another portion of it is Mike Tressel, right? Mike Tressel, this new scheme. One player that has specifically talked about the scheme kind of being a little more helpful towards him is Ricardo Hallman. In the spring, when I talked to Ricardo Hallman, he said how a little bit of his development this offseason has just been a little more comfortable in his role in this scheme as that off-boundary guy, while Alexander Smith plays that press man kind of role, and that's allowed him to become more instinctual and a little better at the point of catch. So I think that there are different players that could benefit from the scheme and, be poised for a breakout season. And you could definitely see that. And so while this group might not necessarily stand out on paper as much as previous groups have for the Badgers, I don't think there's going to be a significant drop-off defensively, especially when you consider, some players are only getting better. You look at that linebacker room where you've got 3 starting caliber guys who the Badgers really trust as, top linebackers at this level. And then we can talk about the secondary as well. But let's start at linebacker. Muma returns. You got Jordan Turner there as well, who seems to be all cleared from his off-the-field issues this past offseason. And then Jake Chaney is there as well. 3 guys. What do you think about that room there?
It's a good room. Again, I mean, there may not be someone that jumps off as an all Big Ten first team guy, but you have a tremendous amount of talent and upside in that group. So I'm excited to see what they can do. I mean, I mentioned a couple of the outside linebacker guys, but the inside guys, I mean, one of the big concerns was, can you stop the run this year? Can you stop the run? And part of that is obviously linked to the D-line, but I feel very confident in this defense, and it's gonna be some looks that look similar. There can be some looks that look new, given some of the configurations. But Tressel knows what he's doing. I mean, this is not losing Jim Leonard. That is for some programs that would be a death knell for their defense. I don't feel that way about this particular defense. I think this defense can be fine. I think they're going to give up more points for the reasons I said earlier, because they're going to be on the field more frequently, and there's going to be higher scoring games. But I do think this is going to be a solid defense. With potential for much, much more. And that linebacker group has huge upside, and it wouldn't stun me if there was a all Big Ten second team or first team guy that emerges from that group, just based on production.
And I think that's true as well. You look at it, Muma was I believe an all Big Ten third team by the media last year, and you've got returners right in this room. The main thing now with this group is how do they kind of fare. Well, there's 2 things. 1, can they clean up some of the missed tackles? And 2, how do they fare in coverage? Because the one thing that Mike Tressel is going to allow these linebackers to do and build off what they did with Jim Leonard is blitz. Mike Tressel likes blitzing different linebackers from different alignments, shooting them out of different gaps. That's something that I saw at least sprinkled in the spring. I think that blitzing is going to be a good portion of what this defense is, and that's going to help alleviate some of the pressure off the defensive line. That's going to allow some of these guys, to be in a different mode where they're a little more comfortable. Jordan Turner, Muma, even Jake Chaney. And so I think the biggest question is, how well do they hold up in coverage in zones? That's kind of the main thing, because sometimes, last year when the pass defense was getting diced up a little bit, it was, quarterbacks fitting balls into these zones, or players, overstretching their roles and then kind of putting themselves in bad positions so that some of the middle of the field stuff was open. But the defense has usually been pretty solid, and I think they're in an opportunity to do similar things this year with their linebacker room.
Look, here's what it's going to. I mean, it's more nuanced than this, but I'll do this as a high level. If this Wisconsin defense can effectively get to the quarterback, this could be one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. If this Wisconsin defense struggles with getting to the quarterback, it's going to be tricky. We'll see what happens. It's going to require a little more moxie and a little more in-game adjustment and things like that. But that's really the binary for me. I mean, if they can put pressure and heat on those, they're going to have some good QBs they play against this year. Starting, honestly, you got a second-year starter coming up from Buffalo. You have a good, solid offense up in Pullman, Washington. Early on in the season, you got Purdue will always be good as far as how they get out there. It's going to be some early season tests. You may not have your big marquee games immediately, but this defense is going to be tested. We're going to know a lot about this team by week 3. After week 3, we're going to know a lot, and whether this defense can get to the quarterback. I'm bullish. We'll see what happens. I think they can. I think that Tressell's a bright guy, and he's learned. I think he's learned things from his predecessor, Jim Leonard. And I think he's brought things that Leonard didn't have. So I think it's going to be fine. We just got to keep this team healthy and get to the quarterback.
I agree. Let's talk about corners. A room that has seen, it was a room where you saw a lot of transfers and then a lot of different players come in at some stage in the offseason. Talking about the transfers, Samar Melvin left, a former 4-star corner. He left to Michigan State, but then you had the trio of corners essentially kind of being asked to leave. It wasn't like, in a way, because the talent room wasn't necessarily what the Badgers wanted. Al Ashford, Avion Jones, and then as well as, well, I always forget the third name off the top of my mind, but there were 3 corners that departed in the spring. The Badgers then bring in, true freshman Jonas DeClona, Jace Arnold. You had a strong group of corners in the class. AJ Tisdale was there, Justin Taylor, although he might play safety, and then Amari Snowden, right, the 6'3" corner. You then bring in Nizer Forkeron as well as Michael Mack, although Mack did post earlier today. He will not play in 2023. The waiver was denied, but you still have him.
Let me stop you here, Rohan, and I just saw that news too. And this is I will editorialize a little bit about the NCAA. How ridiculous something like not allowing Mac to play is when a guy can have a $300,000 car given to him his first day on campus. It's such a weird, nonsensical way they go about things. And this is just the latest chapter and I don't want to say, oh, poor Wisconsin Badgers. It seems like we've gotten it worse. And a basketball guy a couple of years ago, they made sit out for no effing reason, really, till the second semester, which was preposterous. But here we go again, and I think that the staff had a plan B, but they are surprised that the NCAA didn't grant this waiver, given the Wild West atmosphere of so much of these things, that some teams have millions of dollars in payroll, basically, for NIL stuff. And this kid who just wants to continue his education in football at a different school, this by all accounts, good kid that was with the Air Force Academy. So he brings it in the classroom as well and has the character. Can't play for the team he wants to because it was a little teeny technicalities here and there. It's just, again, a scathing indictment of the state of the NCAA in 2023. It's garbage. It's BS. And, he'll be fine next year. And I think the second year will be fine. But boy, oh boy, we could have used him in that room.
Yeah, I mean, this is one where the Badgers are really hoping, they don't face many issues depth-wise at cornerback because, now the goal of this entire offseason was to get 4 guys who you trust, where the 2, if they got injured, the 2 starters, you then have 2 backups. But more importantly, this group is going to rotate in. But now you kind of only have 3. Mac was going to be the bridge. You wanted some bridge between, your starters and your true freshmen. So you'd allow the true freshmen to develop, potentially be able to redshirt, and then, kind of kick it off in 2024 when they have a year of seasoning under their belt. However, Mac not playing now means that Jonas DeClona enters the 2 deep, and he's going to be your 4th string corner or your 4th cornerback, behind Forkeron, behind Alexander Smith and Ricardo Hallman. And the way I look at it right now, I think Nazir Forkron is a guy you have to watch in this room, and it's a guy who the staff is high on. I do believe he's going to end up being in a part of the rotation. I think they'll play 3 cornerbacks exclusively in a rotation on the outside with Smith, Hallman, and Forkron, because Forkron provides you good size. He's 6'1", he's got good length, and that's something that's important for that press man role. The other portion, the other guy, Michael Mack, was also 6'1". Some guys who provide you better length as opposed to the 5'11" and 5'9" that Ricardo Hallman and Alexander Smith are. But regardless, the Badgers have to move forward here and really hoping you don't get injuries in this room. Otherwise, you might have to play players a little earlier than you'd want to ideally.
Yeah, agreed. But, 2023's loss is 2024's gain. That's I guess that's the philosophical way you got to look at it. So having Mac with more eligibility next year, it'll be fine. And again, I alluded to this earlier that the schedule gets significantly harder, and not just because Alabama is added to that with the home and home. So I think we'll be all right. But again, I mean, you hate to say you want to rely on health to make things work, but the depth probably could be better. That's fair to say. But I know Fickle and his staff have tried. Whoa, okay. Fickle and his staff have definitely tried to address that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Apologize for that. Something just dropped, but we are good. But I mean, again, right, like you said, when you talk about Mac, the unfortunate reality, he couldn't take a visit this summer because he was at the Air Force, couldn't take a visit. So he really made a gut decision, transferred to Wisconsin, and then now having to face the issues he's facing now. You do get that 1 year. But it's unfortunate the way that the rules are that you need that waiver. The good thing he is redshirting this year now, so you'll have that extra year of eligibility. But it is unfortunate. It is.
Well, it's just it's the base hypocrisy. You can basically and don't get me wrong, I'm not an NIL opponent by any stretch. I think these kids should be paid.
Right.
I've long said that. At least the Scary Alvarez has long said that. But just the hypocrisy of allowing kids to roll around in $200,000 cars that they're doing an endorsement for the thing for the Ferrari dealership, but a kid didn't get a waiver in until 5 days late or something. So you're going to penalize this kid who's been on course to serve his country with the Air Force. It just doesn't make sense. And I think it's the NCAA trying to hold on to these little parts that they can still exercise their authority on to make themselves feel good and feel relevant. And it's absolute trash. And frankly, I'd be happy with a different organization, having the NCAA be detonated and starting anew with conferences running themselves and stuff, because they don't really do anything except for make money. The basketball stuff is cool. That's we can talk about that another day, but they're using the kids there too. And they're the unfair decisions all across the board. But anyway, I can get off my soapbox there as impressive as that soapbox may be. But yeah, tough break for Mac, but he'll have a good year next year.
I agree. Let's move on to our last room of the day, the safeties. One of the deeper rooms. The Badgers didn't really bring in too many players via the transfer portal, didn't lose too many players apart from John Torchio at this position either. So it's going to be a similar room, and you get some players back from injury, Travion Blaylock, Hunter Wohler. What are you thinking about this room this year?
Hunter Wohler, I'm not sure if you watch, I mean, one of the tens of thousands who love the Scary Alvarez podcast, which of course is now the gold standard in Wisconsin sports podcasts. But I had Hunter on earlier this summer and had a chance to get to know him a little bit better. And he is, not just because he won the podcast, but he's my pick for the breakout player of the defense. I think he is going to have an incredible year. Just needs to stay healthy. That's always my caveat. But he's just such a hardworking, instinctual, and also physically talented player. So I look for a big year from Hunter.
Yeah, I mean, I got to speak to Hunter Wohler on Monday when we had our interviews, and Hunter Wohler was made available to the media. I mean, he seems like a good kid, and I mean, overall, it seems like he's ready. He's ready to go out there, just enjoy the season, and play with the guys who he's now been able to, have some rapport with. I like this safety room because I like the difference in the three players, the three key players at safety with Travion Blaylock in the mix as well. I like the difference because you've got Hunter Roller, a versatile chess piece that you can play in the dollar role. You can play as a linebacker. You could play on the back end, depending on the different package you want to install. But then you've got a guy with good speed in Travion Blaylock. That's a guy who can man your back end. Injury has obviously been an issue, but Travion Blaylock's fully healthy. He's out there. The only contingency there, he's a little smaller on the smaller side. He's around 5'11", around probably 5'11", 210. But you've got a guy there. And then Kamoy Latu, obviously, he's a guy who is a very solid, aggressive player. He will play aggressively, and that allows, his teammates to sometimes clean up his work. The main thing with this safety room is how well can they tackle. Safeties coach Colin Hitchler, one of the first things he said is that's going to be an area of improvement, and so you're going to see how well can they tackle. That's a true question.
We'll see, but in terms of just pure football talent, this is one of the better safety rooms that I can remember. Just and upside. Stepping back a little bit, though, I will say, and we touched on this previously, this secondary in general from corner, this is as short as the Wisconsin secondary is going to be.
Man, yeah.
For a long time. And that's no, rip on anyone who's not a 6'3", prototypical 6'3", 220 corner, like a Snowden or something. But this is the last year where Wisconsin is going to be shorter than the receivers. I think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a good sign, because when you want to implement this press man system, you need good press man players. And it's sometimes harder, obviously, to win at the line of scrimmage or win with your hands and your length when you're not, a prototypical 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" guy as the press boundary guy here in this offense. But overall, I think the Badgers, it's going to be a collective effort defensively. It's not like necessarily I think they'll rely on one specific group. You're going to need a solid pass rush to be able to hold up in the secondary. But the secondary guys also have to play well and in unison in order for that pass rush to work. It's got to be a symbiotic relationship this year because I don't think that, when you look at the pass rush, it's a little bit unproven. And then when you look at the secondary, you're hoping, for a step up as well, although it is a pretty solid group. I think that you're going to have to work together a more collective effort this year in order to get this defense fully running.
Yeah, I agree. But, that's what makes it so much fun. If you knew the final result before the season and how everything's going to gel offensively and defensively, it wouldn't be nearly as much fun. Of course, winning is fun, and having the units be incredibly successful and have a seamless transition to a new style is also fun. But I think this defense is gonna have moments this year where we'll be real impressed with them. I think it's a good group of kids, and it's only going to get better.
I agree. That is something we'll definitely look to see as this group kind of develops throughout the year. But week 1 is upon us. It's 2 days away. First game will be there. I will be there at the game. Hopefully have a live for you guys after the game. But Scary, as always, the one and only, thank you for joining the show and giving us your thoughts on this team and on the season.
Sure, I'm not even charging you, which is actually amazing. And I, by the way, I just noticed that this has been going live. So sorry for not retweeting that earlier. I didn't see that. And my unpaid graduate assistant, Joe Ferguson, was supposed to be on top of that. But by the way, Rohan, I know you're a 49ers guy and maybe a little less of a Dallas Cowboys fan after the trade this week. But what are your thoughts on Jake Ferguson and his new starting role with the Dallas Cowboys?
I like him. I like him as a player. I mean, if you're only looking at traits, you're not going to be very enamored by Jake Ferguson necessarily. But he's solid. He's solid in that he's reliable with his hand, and then he's able to utilize some of that speed into being a capable route runner. And I mean, we saw glimpses of that last year because Dalton Schultz was injured, but I think he's going to be a solid player and a guy who they hope can, fill that Schultz role when Schultz was not injured.
Yeah, I think people saw he was a tight end out of Wisconsin and decided that he was not that athletic and didn't have some of that stuff. And then you watch him play, and he's hurdling guys. And he's doing the blocking you need him to do, and he's making big catches and getting touchdowns. And that was just a tantalizing glimpse 2022 into what Jake has. So I'm going to set, this isn't a gambling show, but I'm going to set the over under on touchdowns for Jake at 7.5 this season.
Wow.
In that offense, taking over that Dalton Schultz role, which really was Dalton Schultz was holding on to the Jake Ferguson role. That's how I prefer to look at it. But anyway, I'm not a Cowboys fan, and I'm not a Niners fan, so go Pack, go. And thanks for having me on, Rohan. This should be a fun one.
No, it definitely would. Everybody who's going to end up watching this, we really appreciate you helping continue to support the channel as we start this one up. Scary as always, thank you, and we will catch you guys next time with another fun episode.